He led the way and set himself, as by right, to hack at the tangles. Jack brought up the rear, displaced and brooding. So by Ralph asking that one question, why do you hate me, he has taken over the lead again. The pig track was a dark tunnel, for the sun was sliding quickly toward the edge of the world, and in the forest shadows were never far to seek. The track was broad and beaten, and they ran along at a swift trot. Then the roof of leaves broke up and they halted, breathing quickly, looking at the few stars that pricked round the head of the mountain. "There you are." The boys peered at each other doubtfully. Ralph made a decision. "We'll go straight across to the platform and climb tomorrow." They murmured agreement, but Jack was standing by his shoulder. "If you're frightened, of course." Ralph turned on him. "Who went first on Castle Rock?" "I went too, and that was daylight." "All right, who wants to climb the mountain now?" Silence was the only answer. "Sam and Eric, what about you?" "We ought to go and tell Piggy." "Yes, tell Piggy that—" "But Simon went." "We ought to tell Piggy in case—" "Robert? Bill?" They were going straight back to the platform now. Not, of course, that they were afraid, but tired. Ralph turned back to Jack. "You see, I'm going up the mountain." The words came from Jack viciously, as though they were a curse. He looked at Ralph, his thin body tensed, his spear held as if he threatened him. "I'm going up the mountain to look for the beast. Now." Then the supreme sting, the casual bitter word. "Coming?" So he's challenging Ralph by asking him, "Are you coming up the mountain or not? Are you too afraid?" At that word, the other boys forgot their urge to be gone and turned back to sample this fresh rub of two spirits in the dark. The word was too good, too bitter, too successfully daunting to be repeated. It took Ralph at low water when his nerve was relaxed for the return to the shelter and the still, friendly waters of the lagoon. "I don't mind." Astonished, he heard his voice come out cool and casual, so that the bitterness of Jack's taunt felt powerless. "If you don't mind, of course." "Oh no, not at all." Jack took a step. "Well then." Side by side, watched by silent boys, the two started up the mountain. Ralph stopped. "We're silly. Why should only two go? If we find anything, two won't be enough." There came the sound of boys scuttling away. Astonishingly, a dark figure moved against the tide. "Roger?" "Yes." "That's three, then." Once more they set out to climb the slope of the mountain. The darkness seemed to flow around them like a tide. Jack, who had said nothing, began to choke and cough, and a gust of wind set all three of them spluttering. Ralph's eyes were blinded with tears. So think about near the beginning of the novel where Jack and Ralph and Simon go up the mountain. It was daytime, they were all having fun, it was kind of lighthearted and exciting to be exploring. Now you have kind of the opposite of that. You have Ralph and Jack and Roger. So it's not so lighthearted anymore. Simon's a very thoughtful boy, very likable. Roger, kind of the opposite of that. Ashes were on the edge of the burnt patch. Their footsteps and the occasional breeze were stirring up small devils of dust. Now that they stopped again, Ralph had time while he coughed to remember how silly they were. If there was no beast, then almost certainly there was no beast. In that case, well and good. But if there was something waiting on the top of the mountain, what was the use of three of them, handicapped by the darkness and carrying only sticks? "We're being fools." Out of the darkness came the answer. "Windy?" And windy in British slang means scared. So Jack is asking Ralph, "What are you, a scaredy cat?" But windy also is like a play on words. It sounds like Wendy, like a girl's name. And in British slang, Wendy is a kid who doesn't have any friends. So this taunt really works on two different levels here. Irritably, Ralph shook himself. This was all Jack's fault. "Course I am, but we're still being fools." "If you don't want to go on," said the voice sarcastically, "I'll go up by myself." Ralph heard the mockery and hated Jack. The sting of ashes in his eyes, tiredness, fear, enraged him. "Go on then, we'll wait here." There was silence. "Why don't you go? Are you frightened?" A stain in the darkness, a stain that was Jack, detached itself and began to draw away. "All right, so long." The stain vanished and another took its place. So Roger's come to sit next to Ralph now. Ralph felt his knee against something hard and rocked a charred trunk that was edgy to the touch. He felt the sharp cinders that had been bark push against the back of his knee and knew that Roger had sat down. He felt with his hands and lowered himself beside Roger, while the trunk rocked among invisible ashes. Roger, uncommunicative by nature, said nothing. He offered no opinion on the beast, nor told Ralph why he had chosen to come on this mad expedition. He simply sat and rocked the trunk gently. Ralph noticed a rapid and infuriating tapping noise and realized that Roger was banging his silly wooden stick against something. So they sat there, the rocking, tapping, impervious Roger and Ralph fuming. Round them the close sky was loaded with stars, save where the mountain punched up a hole of blackness. There was a slithering noise high above them, the sound of someone taking giant and dangerous strides on rock or ash. Then Jack found them and was shivering and croaking in a voice they could just recognize as his. "I saw a thing on top." They heard him blunder against the trunk, which rocked violently. He lay silent for a moment, then muttered, "Keep a good lookout. It may be following." A shower of ash powdered round them. Jack sat up. "I saw a thing bulge on the mountain." "You only imagined it," said Ralph shakily, "because nothing would bulge. Not any sort of creature." Roger spoke. They jumped, for they had forgotten him. "A frog!" Jack giggled and shuddered. "Some frog. There was a noise too, a kind of plop noise. Then the thing bulged." Ralph surprised himself, not so much by the quality of his voice, which was even, but by the bravado of its intention. "We'll go and look." For the first time since he had first known Jack, Ralph could feel him hesitate. "Now?" His voice spoke for him. "Of course." He got off the trunk and led the way across the clinking cinders up into the dark, and the others followed. Now that his physical voice was silent, the inner voice of reason and other voices too made themselves heard. Piggy was calling him a kid. Another voice told him not to be a fool, and the darkness and desperate enterprise gave the night a kind of dentist's chair unreality. As they came to the last slope, Jack and Roger drew near, changed from the ink stains to distinguishable figures. By common consent they stopped and crouched together. Behind them on the horizon was a patch of lighter sky, where in a moment the moon would rise. The wind roared once in the forest and pushed their rags against them. Ralph stirred. "Come on." They crept forward, Roger lagging a little. Jack and Ralph turned the shoulder of the mountain together. The glittering lengths of the lagoon lay below them, and beyond that a long white smudge that was the reef. Roger joined them. Jack whispered, "Let's creep forward on hands and knees. Maybe it's asleep." Roger and Ralph moved on, this time leaving Jack in the rear for all his brave words. They came to the flat top where the rock was hard to hands and knees. A creature that bulged. Ralph put his hand in the cold, soft ashes of the fire and smothered a cry. His hand and shoulder were twitching from the unlooked-for contact. Green lights of nausea appeared for a moment and ate into the darkness. Roger lay behind him, and Jack's mouth was at his ear. "Over there, where there used to be a gap in the rock, a sort of hump, see?" Ashes blew into Ralph's face from the dead fire. He could not see the gap or anything else because the green lights were opening again and growing, and the top of the mountain was sliding sideways. So it's almost like Ralph is, he's obviously not feeling well, and he's trying not to pass out, really, from the fear. He's trying not to faint. Once more, from a distance, he heard Jack's whisper. "Scared?" Not scared so much as paralyzed, hung up there immovable on the top of a diminishing, moving mountain. Jack slid away from him. Roger bumped, fumbled with a hiss of breath, and passed onwards. He heard them whispering, "Can you see anything?" "There!" In front of them, only 3 or 4 yards away, was a rock-like hump where no rock should be. Ralph could hear a tiny chattering noise coming from somewhere, perhaps from his own mouth. He bound himself together with his will, fused his fear and loathing into a hatred, and stood up. He took 2 leaden steps forward. Behind them, the sliver of moon had drawn clear of the horizon. Before them, something like a great ape was sitting asleep with its head between its knees. Then the wind roared in the forest. There was a confusion in the darkness, and the creature lifted its head, holding toward them the ruin of a face. Ralph found himself taking giant strides among the ashes, heard other creatures crying out and leaping, and dared the impossible on the dark slope. Presently the mountain was deserted, save for the 3 abandoned sticks and the thing that bowed. So these boys get up the mountain. They finally do see this thing. The beast rises up with the wind. The boys freak out and they're terrified, and they basically run down the mountain in the dark. And that's the end of chapter 7. We're going to get into chapter 8 the next time. Until then, take it easy.